the truth awaits in the dark. True story.
The crunch of heavy snow under an invisible, massive pour. The sharp drop in temperature. The metallic scent of copper and wet fur lingering in the freezing night air. Long before the human brain can register the physical danger, our primal instincts scream a silent warning. You are no longer the hunter. You are the prey. Welcome to the Verdict Files. Today we leave the crushing depths of the ocean and step into the suffocating, freezing darkness of the deep woods. We are opening the vault on a case that proves nature does not negotiate. When humanity pushes too far into the untouched, unforgiving wilderness, the forest doesn't just push back, it hunts. Before we walk into the freezing tree line, I need you to do me a favor. Please gently guide the like button into the darkest, most isolated part of the woods and leave it there without a flashlight. Also, if you have the psychological endurance to face the darkest mysteries of our world, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Now, let's enter the forest. The year was 1915. The location was Sankebetsu, a brutal, unforgiving, and incredibly isolated pioneer village in the wild Hokkaido region of northern Japan. To understand the sheer terror of what happened here, you must first understand the environment. This was not a modern town. Hokkaido in the early 20th century was Japan's wild frontier. The land was entirely dominated by dense, primeval forests, towering mountains, and winters so severe that the snow could bury entire houses. The people who lived in Sankebetsu were pioneers, essentially farmers trying to carve out an agricultural existence in a landscape that actively resisted them. They lived in flimsy, traditional Japanese houses made of thin wood, straw, and paper doors. These structures offered absolutely zero physical protection against the elements, let alone against the creatures that roamed outside. There was no electricity. There were no telephones. The nearest police station was miles away through treacherous, snow-covered mountain passes. If you screamed in Sankebetsu during a winter storm, the only thing that heard you was the forest. But the pioneers were not alone in these woods. They shared the territory with the Usuri brown bear, one of the largest and most aggressive land predators on Earth. Adult males can weigh well over 400 kilograms, standing up to 3 meters tall on their hind legs. They possess a bite force capable of crushing human femurs like dry twigs, and claws the size of butcher knives, designed to tear through thick bark and frozen soil. Usually, these bears enter hibernation in late November to survive the brutal winter. But biology is not always a perfect science. Sometimes, a bear fails to consume enough calories before the snow falls. When a bear is starving and desperate, the biological urge to sleep is entirely overridden by the agonizing, violent need to feed. In the early weeks of November 1915, a massive Usuri brown bear approached the edges of the Sankebetsu settlement. The locals would later name this monster Kesagake, which roughly translates to the diagonal slash from the shoulder, referring to a distinct scar on his body. Kesagake was a giant, an anomaly even among his massive species. He was starving, aggressive, and completely unafraid of human scent. The terror began subtly. In mid-November, Kesagake was spotted near a farmhouse belonging to the Ikeda family. He didn't attack humans immediately. He was testing the perimeter. He stole some harvested corn, investigated the strange smells, and left. The villagers, used to occasional wildlife encounters, formed a small hunting party and managed to shoot the bear, wounding him. But the beast escaped into the blizzard. They assumed the gunshot would teach the animal to fear humans and stay away. That was a fatal, tragic miscalculation. A wounded, starving apex predator does not learn fear. It learns hostility. For weeks, the forest remained silent. The villagers believed the nightmare was over. But deep in the freezing woods, Kesagake was not hibernating. He was recovering, pacing through the deep snow, his hunger growing into a blinding, predatory obsession. And he had realized something terrifying. The strange, two-legged creatures in the wooden boxes were slow, weak, and completely defenseless. On December 9th, the silence of the forest was shattered. It was mid-morning. The men of the Ota family had left their wooden cabin to harvest ice and cut firewood. Left alone in the fragile house were Abe Mayu, the farmer's wife, and a young baby she was looking after. Without warning, the thin wooden walls of the cabin exploded inward. Kesagake did not just enter the house. He obliterated the barrier between the wild and the domestic. The sheer physical force of a 340-kilogram bear crashing through timber and paper is akin to a small car driving through a living room. The psychological horror of that moment is almost impossible to process. 1 second, Mayu was tending to a fire in the safety of her home. The next second, an overwhelming mass of dark fur, razor-sharp claws, and hot, foul-smelling breath filled the tiny room. The baby was killed instantly by a single, devastating swipe of the bear's paw. Mayu tried to fight back, throwing burning firewood at the beast, but her efforts were utterly useless against a creature that evolved to fight off other massive predators. Kesagake overpowered her effortlessly, dragging her still conscious body out of the shattered cabin and into the freezing, snow-covered forest. When the men returned hours later, they found a scene of absolute carnage. The snow around the cabin was painted dark red. A bloody trail led directly into the deep, dark tree line. The monster had officially tasted human blood, and it had claimed the village of Sankebetsu as its personal hunting ground. The village was instantly thrown into a state of sheer panic. A search party consisting of 30 armed men was quickly formed. The next morning, they tracked the bloody trail deep into the forest. Less than a mile away, they encountered Kesagake. The beast was massive, dark, and terrifyingly calm. He charged the group, moving with a speed that defied his massive size. The men fired their primitive rifles, but the cold and their own sheer terror caused many of their guns to misfire or miss entirely. The bear retreated into the dense brush, leaving behind the partially consumed remains of Mayu buried under the snow. The men carried the remains back to the village, seeking refuge in the home of the Miyoke family. As night fell, a heavy, suffocating atmosphere of dread settled over Sankebetsu. Dozens of villagers, including women and children, huddled together in the Miyoke cabin, clutching whatever weapons they could find: pitchforks, knives, and old hunting rifles. This is where the true psychological horror of the incident takes hold. Humans are not used to being the hunted. We build walls to keep the darkness out. But what happens when you realize those walls are nothing but paper to the creature waiting in the dark? According to bear experts, brown bears are highly intelligent and incredibly possessive of their kills. By retrieving Mayu's remains, the villagers had committed the ultimate offense in the eyes of an apex predator. They had stolen his food, and Kesagake was coming to get it back. Around 8 p.m., the terrifying nightmare resumed. Kesagake returned to the Ota cabin, finding it empty. Infuriated, he destroyed whatever was left of the house. Then, guided by his incredible sense of smell, he turned his attention to the Miyoke cabin, where the terrified villagers were hiding. The beast approached the cabin in the pitch-black night. Inside, the only light came from a small central fire. The villagers sat in dead silence, listening to the heavy, methodical crunch of snow outside. The beast was circling the house, testing the walls, smelling the fear. Suddenly, the front wall of the Miyoke cabin was violently smashed open. The giant bear burst into the crowded room. Panic erupted. The central cooking fire was knocked over, plunging the room into absolute darkness. Screams filled the air. In the confined, pitch-black space of the wooden cabin, an apex predator was unleashed upon dozens of trapped humans. Kesagake moved with lethal efficiency in the dark. He struck down anyone in his path. The men tried to fire their rifles, but in the chaos and darkness, they were completely disorganized. Several villagers were mauled, torn apart, and crushed under the immense weight of the animal. A pregnant woman pleaded for her life, begging the beast to spare her unborn child, but the bear showed no mercy. In a matter of minutes, the cabin was transformed into a slaughterhouse. 5 more people were brutally killed in that single chaotic night. Kesagake finally retreated into the storm, dragging another victim with him into the freezing abyss. In less than 48 hours, 6 people were dead. The village of Sankebetsu was completely broken. The news of the massacre eventually reached the regional authorities. Realizing that the local farmers were completely outmatched, the government deployed a heavily armed military unit and dozens of veteran bear hunters to Sankebetsu. The village was completely evacuated. The remaining houses were abandoned, left as bait in a desperate attempt to lure the monster back. A military sniper named Yamamoto Heikichi, a legendary bear hunter who claimed to have killed over 100 bears in his lifetime, took charge of the operation. He recognized that Kesagake was not a normal animal. This was a highly intelligent, rogue man-eater that had learned to actively stalk human settlements. For days, the massive hunting party scoured the freezing forests. The weather was horrific. Blinding snowstorms reduced visibility to almost zero. The hunters were tracking a ghost, a 340-kilogram ghost that knew the terrain better than they did. To gain a tactical advantage, the hunters resorted to a grim and horrifying strategy. They used the recovered corpses of the victims, placing them inside the abandoned cabins as bait, hoping the possessive nature of the bear would draw him back. The hunters hid in the rafters, waiting in the freezing dark with their rifles aimed at the bodies of their neighbors. But Kesagake was too smart. He approached the cabins, smelled the ambush, and vanished back into the woods. Finally, on December 14th, a break in the weather allowed Yamamoto and a small team of trackers to locate fresh footprints. They followed the massive tracks up a steep, snow-covered mountain. There, resting under a large Japanese oak tree, was Kesagake.
What is this?
Yamamoto, knowing that a single missed shot would mean instant death for him and his men, crept forward silently. He closed the distance to less than 20 meters. He raised his military rifle, took aim at the beast's massive heart, and fired. The bullet struck true. Kesagake roared, rising to his massive height, ready to charge. But Yamamoto immediately fired a second shot, hitting the bear directly in the head. The monster of Sankebetsu finally collapsed into the snow, dead. When the hunters approached the carcass, the true scale of the nightmare became apparent. Kesagake measured 2.7 meters long and weighed a staggering 340 kilograms. He was a mountain of muscle, fat, and fur. But it was the autopsy that revealed the most chilling detail. Inside the bear's stomach, they found the undigested clothing, bones, and hair of the villagers he had consumed. This was the ultimate, irrefutable proof that this animal had bypassed every natural instinct to avoid humans, and had instead classified them as its primary food source. The aftermath of the Sankebetsu incident left a permanent psychological scar on the region. The survivors never returned to their homes. The village of Sankebetsu became a ghost town, entirely abandoned to the elements and the creeping forest. The fear of what lived in the dark woods was too great to ever overcome. This case is a terrifying reminder of our actual place in the natural order. We build our cities, we light our streets, and we convince ourselves that we are the masters of the planet. But the moment you step off the concrete and walk deep into the ancient, freezing woods, the rules of human civilization instantly evaporate. Out there, in the dark, you are not a citizen. You are simply biology. You are meat. And if you encounter an animal that is hungry enough and strong enough, the forest will ensure that you never return. Thank you for joining me on this investigation. If you made it out of the woods alive, make sure you hit the subscribe button to join us for our next classified case. And tell me in the comments below, what is the most terrifying animal you could possibly encounter in the dark? This has been the Verdict Files. Stay safe and never walk into the deep woods alone.
The truth awaits in the dark. true story.